Hey everyone, Kelvin here. Welcome back to my channel. And today we're going to finish out most of the index page. So we need to do the search widgets, especially the search bar here. Once all of that's done, we send the data to our state or whatever, so we can manipulate the list of job listings here. So let's get started. I think the best part to start first is probably the search bar. And let's make a new component module called search, and then the component that we're going to make first is the search box. And what I'm thinking is we want to render a form with an input inside. Now I don't want to actually add a lot of form component libraries, so we'll just use state and handle it the old-fashioned way. So with value and set value, we can attach it to the input and do e.target.value. And my bad, this should be on change. And let's also add a type here to be a type text. And I believe we have a placeholder. Let me check the mock. Okay, it's kind of hard to see zoomed out like this, but it says title, company's expertise, or benefits. So let's add that in. And then lastly, I want to create an onSubmit function for the form here. And because this is a HTML form, we need to make sure that we do prevent defaults on the form event. And one last thing, what else do we need? So we have a button, and we also have this briefcase icon. So we can add those two as well. And since they're kind of hovering on top of the icon, I think we need to surround this by its own div. So let's make a div around the input, as well as a button. And we'll set this to type submit, so then it could submit the form with the text of search. Now to complete this before styling it, we need the icon. So we're going to go by our convention and go back to common.icon. And the icon we want, we're going to call it work icon, but it's going to be the work outline icon. And let's also make sure that we export that so we can use it back in our search box, which we'll just put in here right above the input. So in index, let's make sure that we export the search box, and then let's add this to our index page so then we can start seeing it. And let's not forget to import it. Let's make sure that, yeah, that's good. All right, so without styles, it looks like this. So not great. All right, let's go do some magic. Actually, before we start styling, I want to change some of this up. So let's first get rid of this use effect. And what I want to do is send in handle search to the search box. So we're going to make an event here, or a prop, I mean, that says something like on search, where we can send in handle search. And the only change here is I'm going to change the argument so that it could take in a term of type string. And then inside the stringify, let's just get rid of everything except for the term and send that in. Now this is failing because we need to update our props. So we're going to go back to the search box, change the interface to take in on search, which is going to be a function that returns void. So we don't need to return anything. We just need to invoke the form event. And I don't know why I didn't add props here, but we need to do that. But now we get the props of on search. And then inside the form event, we'll call on search, sending in the text value. I messed up on the typing. OnSearch is a function that takes in a string input, so we need to do that. So this is kind of a concept where you send in events as props, and then you can invoke the callback, if you will, sending data back up the component tree to the parent. And here, this is also another reason why we're holding the text value, because the form event itself doesn't exactly have the value of the input, so we need to get it directly from the input HTML tag here. Now the next step is to style this, so let's just make a search module CSS file, and don't forget to import your CSS. So I'm just going to make the first class is search box. We'll add that class name to the form. So first I'm just going to add these spacing properties, which you could get from the Figma mockup. An interesting property here is that we're going to have the background image to be that asset that we've gotten from the devchallenges zip file. everything referenced inside of public. So public assets, and it's going to be this background image. So we can reference it like this. Now lastly, to get the image div centered correctly, we'll use display flex and then just use centering on justify content and align items. And with just the container styles, we already have this nice little background. Now we need to do the actual input itself. And this is going to be a little tricky because we need to use position relative. The width here doesn't actually matter. I just felt 50% felt right. But this class goes on the outer div, so right here, search box input. And then using the container class, we'll target each of the elements specifically, like so. Now we're going to do the easiest one first, which is placeholder. And all we need to do is make sure that the text inside the placeholder is gray. And then after that, let's do the input. Since it's the one that's kind of holding the other two things, the button and the SVG. So we'll add some normal style for spacing and border, as well as this box shadow that you can get from the Figma mockup. And let's take a look at what that is so far. So the input looks pretty good. We just need to make sure that this search button is now also inside. And then this icon, which you can barely see, also goes inside. Now for the search icon, we need to add a little bit of spacing on the left. So both the cursor and the placeholder is also shifted. And that's kind of easy to do. You just need to add a padding left. And I felt that 3 rem is about the right amount of space. Since we did that first, let's do the SVG next. So first we need to give it position absolute. So that'll take it out of the whole DOM, but it's going to be anchored onto the position relative of the input container. We'll specify the top is going to be a 0, so that's going to be the origin 0, 0, upper left-hand corner. And then also the color of gray instead of that bluish color. So right now it's in this top left corner and we want to transform it. I mean, not transform it. I'm already giving it away, but we want to shift it into the center here. And that we can achieve by doing a transform, which will translate 50% in both the X and Y direction. And now finally, let's do the button. So once again, we're going to do position absolute, top 0, but then we're going to do right 0, so it's on the right side. So let's look at that. There it is. Now the rest is just going to be normal button-ish styling. So I hope this part doesn't surprise you too much. But it's going to be all of these properties here. And then lastly, we want to add a margin of 0.2 rem. And this will give the effect that it's kind of floating inside of the input. So there's a little bit of spacing between the outer edge. But that's the search box. Now we need to work on the other widgets. So this checkbox, as well as this location thing. So let's start with the checkbox. I'm actually going to start inside the index page. So the home page, I mean. And what the checkbox signifies is the type here. So what we can do is create a use state. And these two are what we want to send into the checkbox. Because we want to hold the data here, but we want to manipulate it inside of our subcomponent. And then with the type, we're going to add it to our fetch API. So right here inside the body. And with that, let's create our search type.tsx. Now this is going to be relatively simple as a HTML component, where we just want an input and label, an input of type checkbox, and the label text is going to be full time. But we need to edit the search type props so that I can take in a Boolean value as well as a change event. And this change event is going to take in a Boolean argument. This way we get the checked props and the onChange. And that's where we could send in checked as checked. And we could send in onChange as onChange. But I want to make a helper function called toggle since there's only ever going to be 2 different states. And then on this on the inputs onChange, we can just send in toggle. So it's a little more clear. And then the last thing that we need is to give this a ID, and then the label has an HTML4 to reference that ID. Other than that, we need a CSS class, which I'll just call it Checkbox. Not super creative, but that's okay. And then for the checkbox, we'll just set height and width, and then give it some margin so then the label has enough space in between. But that is honestly it. So let's go back to our index page and add this in. And I'll just go underneath here as the search type. Checked is going to be type, which we've set from set state. And then on change is set type. And then make sure that we import this. I did not add it to the index. We need to do that. So export search type. All right, cool. And there we go. So that was easy, not too hard. Okay, location is going to be a bit trickier. So I'm just going to go ahead and create the search location component. And then before I forget, add it here. And let's start the search location component. So what we want is going to be an input here. We also want a dynamic list of radio boxes. That's going to be annoying. And I guess we'll just add the title. That's not too bad. There's going to be an h3 of location. And we're going to want an input here. And it's inside of a div because we're going to add the globe icon on the left side. And all right, so what we want inside of the props is whatever location that we're selecting. And then the event, when we select a location, we have to send it back to the index page. So that will have a value of string. And let's destructure that now. And as before, we have a individual input and a form that we're submitting. So for the text value, we'll use value and set value. And then we want a form events, which I'm going to define out here instead of inside of the form inline, just because it's going to be a little bigger than the form that we created earlier. And that has to do with that radio box or radio container. So what we want here is an array of selections that we can map into making a bunch of different components like this. So before anything, I'm going just to create a use state for that array beforehand because I know we're going to get into it. And it's just going to be of type array string. We're not going to hold anything special, so shouldn't be too bad. But let's get into this map. So we're going to map out a bunch of divs that all have inputs and labels. And all of the inputs are radio buttons. I'm going to set the ID to whatever the string is. So then we could do an HTML4 to reference that string, and hopefully it's unique. But the label itself will also be that string. And since we're doing a map, let's make sure that we add the key here. So we're using the S in many different places. All right, now let's just open up this input. And all of these have to have the same name, so they reference the same value basically to toggle between. But then here's the actual logic. So the radio button is going to be checked if it's referring to the same location prop that we are holding inside of the index page. And then on change, we'll hit it or change it to whatever is filled in the next location box. So I'm just going to show this. So say that we have New York selected and we want to click on London. It'll update the state not only here, but also inside of the rest of the index page. But then we also need to know like where all of these selections come from. And that's from filling out the input. So that's what happens inside the form event. So this selection map is done. We just need to fill out the handle new location form event here. So what happens after a new form submit is that we're definitely going to call the onChange method from the search selection props. We're also going to reset the value of the text input. But before both of those fire, we need to call set selection so that we have the entire list. And what I'm going to do is just spread out the current selection list and add in the value. But then we'll also surround that by a new set and convert it back to an array. But this is so that it'll get rid of all the duplicates. I hope that isn't too confusing and you're able to follow along. But with all of that, we can go back and add it to our index page. And that's just going to be down here. And then we need to make another state variable that we can send into search location. So we'll create location and set location. Don't forget to add it to your body, as well as the search location components. Set location. And lastly, we need to import it. Did I not? I named it on change, right? Oh, this is not a of type string. That'll fix it. Okay. So we have the functionality of this going, and we can just run like, I don't know, New York, Las Vegas, and then we can also click. Okay, that's not working. What about the remove duplicates works? So I just need to make sure that the on click works. So let's check what we need to fix inside of search location. Oh, I forgot to actually set a value to these radio boxes. So yeah, that one's going to be equal to S as well. And now we can start styling the search location widget. Boop, 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 boop. Let's start with the location header. So class name will go here, CSS location header, and add CSS, so we need to go do that. All right, back to the header. We'll make it gray, uppercase, and have the Poppins font. Next is we're gonna need the class name of location input, and that is gonna use the same trick that we had on our search box, so position relative. But this time it's just gonna be full width, so 100%. Because we can't use the same search box input because of the different width, but we can reuse the same styles for the input and the SVG. All we need to do is add a comma and target the input with the location input class. Same goes for the placeholder as well as the SVG. And speaking of reusing, we could also reuse the checkbox class name inside of the radio button, because this is just for the sizing and also the margin. And I believe that's all we really need. The style is just being reused mostly. So that's what we have right now, which doesn't look too bad. The only thing is we need to actually put it on the side and have that whole responsive nature. Speaking of responsive nature, when this main search box is shrunken down, it's kind of unusable, so we need to change this. So let's go up to search box input, add a media query, and I'm going to reuse the tablet sizing, and this time we're going to change the width to 90%. So this is a little better. The placeholders are still kind of weird, but it's not something that I am too terribly worried about. But that's all we need from the search module CSS. To do the responsive styling on the index page, we're actually going to edit the global styles. So first I'm going to put the search type and search location inside of its own div. And this will have a class name of search widgets. I want the list of jobs to also have its own class name, but this is just for full width. So I'm going to use kind of a utility styles mentality here. And finally, I'm going to wrap both of those in another div. When we save, it'll be nested like that. And this class name is going to be responsive. So with all of that, let's go into the global styles. And we're going to go all the way down to the bottom. Full width is 100%. Search widget is going to be a little more specialized, having a min width and margin right. And the responsive is going to be display flex. Now this is all the desktop styling, so I also need to make a media query for the smaller size. And I'm still using the tablet size because I think that's a good cutoff point. But we're just going to change the responsive styling to have the column flex direction. And for the search widgets, we're going to remove the margin right, as well as now having a full width. So with all of that, we can go check our browser page, and that looks pretty good, right? And then also, if we look at it responsively, it's all stacked on top of each other like this. Now let's just add New York or Las Vegas. New York, full-time. Everything looked good, right? Now, ideally, I've already set up all the state management, so we just type in React here. This should update all of the different jobs, or it just prints it out because I didn't actually update. So we need to actually set up that part. So we don't want it to console log. We actually want it to set jobs. So what we're gonna do is have a new use state. This time it's gonna be an array of GitHub jobs with a default value of an empty array, or no, a default value of props.jobs. And then down here, instead of props, we wanted to reference the state jobs. So it's just jobs, like so. I forgot to send in set jobs. So this is now just set jobs. And I believe that should work. So let's try this again. So closure will give us the circle CI jobs. And if we do React, we should get a different selection. And there we go. Now let's try that thing from yesterday where California gives us like one job only for some reason. All right, I have to set. Yeah, why is that? I thought there would be more jobs. I don't know. All right. Well, that'll complete today's video. On the next video, we're just gonna finish out the paginator, and then I am gonna do something that I don't normally do, but I should start doing, and that is to show off how to deploy this. So we'll do that in the next video. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.